I'm Graham Perry, and I'm the Historic Cemetery Preservation Specialist at the Tennessee Historical Commission, and by default for the state, because there isn't another one. Yes, I do. I travel the entire state. Anyway, I'm going to talk to you today about cemetery law, and again, I'm not an attorney, so some of these questions may or may not be more answerable than others. But according to my experience, since I've come into this job, these are the things that, and I've actually talked to them about, talked with our attorney at TDEC, and kind of gotten, I mean, we've kind of come to a conclusion that this is what we think these things mean. If you have a really expensive lawyer, they may change that. But hopefully, this is kind of like, will lay a groundwork for what you can do as far as cemetery preservation when it has to do with legal matters. So, Tennessee law overview. And the reason why I put William Blackstone up there in the U.S. Constitution is because we have to remember that Tennessee cemetery law is based on British cemetery law, which itself is based on Roman common law. So we're talking about thousands of years of precedent. The strong points of Tennessee's law is we have the Family Graves Protection Act, Family Burial Grounds Protection Act, and it's in TCA 46A. And it actually, well, we're going to talk about it, but there's actually some things that, if you're a landowner, that apply to you as well, and that probably family members won't be as excited about. But we will talk about those. The weak point about TCA 46A, and I've had this trouble with developers in the past, although they're getting better, word of mouth is getting around, and I'm getting calls from developers now when they have cemeteries on the property. But many don't read it before taking action. The relocation process is clear. That is a strong point, I guess, if you like relocations. Some people believe that a cemetery should remain exactly where it is until the end of time. That's not a very realistic thought, but especially when you think of Richard III being found under a parking lot in England. But it would be better if they relocated Richard III rather than just paved over it. Relocation is expensive, and so is non-compliance worth the risk? That is what some of the people, I think, get in their head and hope that they won't tell. So the good news about it is I put together this huge cemetery map. And right now it has about 28,000 cemeteries. In our database, we have about 36,000 known cemeteries across the state. So that map is to help not only researchers and historians and family members and stuff like that, but also developers to know that there's a cemetery on the property. So yeah, if they haven't looked, I'm like, yeah, well, you need to look. Tax incentives exist for cemeteries. The benefits, though, are very small, and often they're reported incorrectly. I'll explain that. The desecration law is clear, but the only problem is it's in 46.1313. And guess what? 46.1 only applies for commercial cemeteries. So that is something I'm trying to get changed in the law right now. I've got a 5-year report that's coming out in December, and I'm going to try to get the legislature to fix that little problem. Because desecration obviously needs a definition, but it doesn't need to just apply to commercial cemeteries. We need it for all of them. Criminal penalties, TCA 3917. I always tell people, I was like, well, the problem is the criminal penalties are defined in TCA 39, but it doesn't mention anything about them in 46. So 46 is the actual chapter on cemeteries, so why don't they at least give you a hint that a crime is somewhere else in Title 39. They don't do that. Therefore, a lot of people say, well, it doesn't say here that anything happens. It just says don't do it. Well, you know, they can't. And one of the issues that I have a lot of times with police departments is they don't realize it's a desecration of Title 39, and they won't go out. They're reluctant to go out and file a police report. But by state law, they're supposed to if somebody requesting. Hines versus Tennessee, 1911. This is actually a precedent that strengthens the law. It was passed in 1911. The biggest problem with it is it is where visitation rules are applied, and of course it's not in Title 46, so people think since it's 1911 that it doesn't count anymore, but it does. So TCA 46-4 is the termination of use of land as a cemetery. They passed that after World War II when development was starting to occur during the post-war movement. 46.4.101 basically states that a cemetery, in order to relocate a cemetery, you have to prove to a court that it's abandoned, neglected, or threatened. We'll talk about what those mean in a minute. 46.4.102 defines interested persons. Basically, interested persons are families, but there are other people that can be interested persons. 46.4.103, it describes it tells you what the process is for termination, and it's very specific, so people have to follow it. And 46.4.104 has the provisions for reinterment, and that's where it says that it has to be done with due care and decency. What that means, I don't know. They didn't define it. Get a good enough lawyer, you will see. TCA 46A is the Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. In 103, it states that a landowner has a duty to protect a cemetery, but that is not defined. 103A, it must be on a deed of transfer prior to any kind of transfer. It doesn't matter what it is, if you're transferring it to your kids or whatever, it's got to be on a deed of transfer. They put that in there because many, many cemeteries have fallen off deeds over the past 200 years. 103B, it defines a protected boundary around grave sites. And they cannot be bothered within that. And I'll tell you right now it's 10 feet. But anyway. 103C says if you don't like this, then see TCA 46-4, termination of land uses of cemeteries. But it is very, very specific, at least that part of the cemetery law. So, other things you kind of have to put together from scratch. TCA 46-1, it's actually where the cemetery definition is, and actually they have recently put it also in 46.3. It was a reserved chapter, and they finally, somebody took my advice and said, look, you can't just define a cemetery in 46.1 and then say all the other cemeteries are exempt from it. That doesn't make sense. So now it's in 46.3. Someday I'll update my little thing there. It does, the interesting thing about it is any land or structure in this state dedicated to and used or intended to be used for interment of human remains. If you have a deed from 1859 that says that the family member dedicated a 1-acre cemetery, that's how big the cemetery is. It doesn't matter if there's no graves in it. One grave in Tennessee equals a cemetery. Cemetery can even have no graves, of course, what I just stated. Cemetery purposes, I won't bore you and read this whole thing like I usually do, but it has to do with the interment and interment of the human dead. Pet cemeteries don't count, and trust me, I've gotten calls about pet cemeteries. And this law does not apply to them. 46.4. So, 46.4.101 defines the purpose of the act. It asks the question, is the cemetery abandoned or neglected? Is the purpose of the property surrounding the cemetery inconsistent with proper reverence for the dead? Or the deceased, I should say that. 102 defines who interested parties are, can be family members, relatives, and anyone having the right of easement. That includes, if you want to send a lawnmower out there to go mow the cemetery, just make sure you give them a written note that says they had permission to do that because they're your agent. It applies to all cemeteries in Tennessee. It actually says this, so thank you. 103, actions and proceedings. First, I always say this, and this happens with anything, whether you're cleaning a cemetery or whatever. Check to see if you really own the cemetery if you think you own it, because you might not. And the truth of the matter is, the general rule is you can own a cemetery, but the family members own the tombstones, and the graves are owned by no one. Once the grave is put in the ground, that's why you have to go to 46-4 to relocate. Step 2, complainant must first publish a notice of intent using press sources common to the county. This gets complicated because of the internet now, and they haven't really figured out how to do it. But don't put a notice in the local record store and think you've done it. You know, because it will come back to bite you if somebody challenges you. Step 3, the county chancery court must then be contacted to petition for termination. I have seen people do this without attorneys successfully. Generally speaking, people will consult an attorney to do this. And I actually have a list of attorneys that have done this before, just in case you ever want to do it. I can't recommend a certain one, but I do have a list of several of them. Step 4, the petition must be filed with THC, that's the Tennessee Historical Commission, and it has to be posted on the Tennessee Historical Commission website. Actually, the truth of the matter is it says a notice or the petition. Most people send me both. And I read them because I want to make sure that they're right. And it has made some people upset sometimes, but I can't help that. But there is a certain way that they have to be spelled out, and I just make sure that they are spelled out that way. 104, judgments and decrees, termination, removal. Well, the Chancery Court determines the outcome based on the evidence tied to 46-4-101. Did you prove the cemetery is neglected? Did you prove it's abandoned? One of the problems with abandonment is a cemetery will look abandoned, but really, honestly, there is like somebody that was taking care of it a year ago, and Mother Nature tends to overtake stuff really fast. According to our office, we looked at abandoned or neglected in a period of 50 years. Now, how do you prove that? I don't know, but I'll leave that to the powers that be. Okay, TCA 46.8, this is very important, Family Burial Grounds Protection Act. The purpose is it's intended to provide notice to buyers of property with known burial grounds and grave sites. And known is a big key, because you can buy a piece of property and not know that there's a cemetery on it. However, if they do know there's a cemetery on it, they have to disclose it. And I have had purchasers go back on former landowners and get money for that. So and if I find out beforehand, I'll even call realtors and say, you know, you got to disclose that cemetery. You know. Is the cemetery valuable on a piece of property? That's one of the things. I mean, some people actually do like them, and they'll buy a piece of property because of the cemetery on it. But generally speaking, a cemetery is taboo and untouchable. So if somebody sells you a piece of land that has an acre cemetery on it, they don't tell you the cemetery's on it, you get a 1 acre refund. TCA 46.8-103, it says that landowners have a duty to protect graves or crypts, and disturbances are prohibited. And it also discusses the transfer of remains if you don't like that. The cemetery owner has a duty to protect known graves. It does not define what that duty is. Does the landowner have a duty to clean up the cemetery? No, they don't. A lot of landowners do, and they're very nice to do so. But the technical truth is if a family member got mad because they damaged a tombstone, they could come after the landowner. So the landowner is under no obligation to do that. The owner must ensure the cemetery is on the deed prior to sale or transfer, which we talked about. It defines the prohibited area, 10 feet from a grave, 5 feet from a crypt. Most developers, when they have a cemetery on the location, tend to leave about a 30-foot buffer, but they don't have to. And that's probably pretty safe. Cemeteries can be bigger than you think they are, and most of the time they are. I remember the people in Rutherford County, the guy in Rutherford County, thought he had a 3-grave cemetery on it, and when I went out there, there was probably 50. He wasn't happy with that. But he had actually signed a little thing that said they notified him that the cemetery was on the property, but he saw 3 tombstones and thought, there's only 3 graves. And there were. And it caused a lot of problems, didn't it? It also notifies the owner that if you don't like any of this, see 46.4 and you can petition to relocate the cemetery. I will say this about relocating a cemetery. The reason why these things have to be posted is because it has to give an opportunity for family members to at least know what's going on. Just because a family member challenges a relocation doesn't mean it's not going to happen. If the circuit court or the chancery court actually okays it, then it's going to happen. But family members often can get some kind of, by talking with the person that's relocating it, sometimes they can come up with some reasonable solutions. And trust me, when I get petitions and they say that, we couldn't find any family members, I look for them. And I tell them, hey, guess what? TCA 3917.3, criminal offenses. Well, 311 is about desecration of honored places or flags. I'm not going to go into the flags part, but a person may not desecrate a place of worship or burial. And again, according to tax laws, it's in Tennessee, it's 70 exempt, the tax law. It is a religious exemption, so cemeteries are religious entities. Doing so is a Class E felony, and I always bring up with governments when people do a whole bunch of them, I said, yeah, per count. Because it's expensive. Matter of fact, we had one in Lebanon where there were 149 gravestones toppled. And I pointed out to this, I was like, yeah, you need to prosecute him for a thing. It's $2,500 per desecration. Anyway, and you can go to prison too. TCA 3917.312 is about corpse abuse, or corpses or abuse. You cannot go, if you find a corpse on your land when you're plowing up a field or something like that, you have to stop. If a developer is going around and all of a sudden the body starts popping up or cemetery goods start popping up, they have to stop by law. Yeah, and it doesn't matter if it's a Native American grave or not. I still remember the 70s. Everybody was like, it's just a Native American grave, and people took bones from it and stuff, but they can't do that now. And I also remind people that with a Class E felony, you lose the right to vote, so if you like to vote, don't do it. What do I do if I see desecration? It does not matter if you're a family member. Even I have reported desecration before. The main thing is you call the local police as soon as possible. You contact the county court to notify them of the desecration. And these entities must uphold Tennessee law. If they refuse, you can call the regional DA and notify me. And trust me, my job is to be annoying, and I will be as annoying as I possibly can until people do what they're supposed to. If the regional DA doesn't act, call me and we'll look at what we can do to contact the Attorney General. Corpse abuse, accidental disinterment, stop work immediately, as I've said. Call the police, the health department immediately, and also you're advised to call the Department of Archaeology. And there's Phil Hodge, and there's his number. He's the state archaeologist. But remember, you may have found a murder victim, so please don't be an accessory to a murder. You covered up a crime by getting rid of a body. If you see intentional disinterment, call local police immediately and get them out there to stop it. So, the funny thing is TCA 685508 is in the health department code. But there's nothing in the cemetery code that traces anything back to the health department. I thought that was kind of interesting. But if you are going to disinter or reinter a body or bodies, you have to get authorization from the health department. And it says It shall be required prior to a disinterment of a dead body or fetus. 508B, such authorization shall be issued by the state registrar to a licensed funeral director or person acting as such upon proper application. And the person acting as such is like a licensed archaeologist. They don't say that though, which can cause confusion. I'm working on that too. So who is allowed? Funeral homes can, and what I always say, funeral home can be used for any grave. It is suggested that if graves are before 1920s, you use an archaeology company. And that is because there may not be anything left and the archaeologists are going to know what they're looking for. Sometimes you have to get in your mind that sometimes a grave relocation is symbolic. Because a lot of times there's nothing there. And sometimes there is. Walter Hines versus State. Okay, so it was decided in 1911. It sets the precedent in Tennessee and actually across the nation. You can like give a thumbs up to Tennessee because everybody cites this everywhere when there's a cemetery problem. It's not completely included in Tennessee code, although some of it is, and I put yet there because I'm trying very hard to get the visitation rules put in Tennessee code. It defines interested party rights. Interested parties, and we'll just say just for ease, we'll say families, have the right to maintain, repair, and beautify a cemetery. Now, where this causes a problem is if there's one family member that doesn't like how it's beautified and the other family gets mad, that's between them. I don't deal with that. That's between them and their attorney. It also establishes the right of visitation. It says that family has the right of visitation from the nearest road at reasonable times in a reasonable manner. And that's where, in some ways, the landowner can be protected a little bit. But it doesn't define what those are. In other states, they do define in their codes what they are. Like in Virginia, they actually have rules for the family members and rules for landowners. And they have to follow them. We don't. I'm trying to get that changed. It also declares that a cemetery is a cemetery forever. Unless, of course, they didn't have 46.4 back then. So when they passed 46.4, that's the only way that you can get a cemetery not to be a cemetery is to legally relocate the graves. A landowner cannot obstruct interested party visitation. There are reasons why a landowner might want to, because he doesn't know who the heck you are. And since a landowner has a duty to protect the cemetery, well, he needs to be able to keep the drug dealers and stuff out of the cemetery, right? So if he didn't know who you are, this is why I always suggest to people, look, you have the right to go visit your cemetery, so please contact the landowner. If the landowner causes a problem, call me and I'll write him a letter. A landowner also cannot desecrate. This means plowing up headstones and using the land for something else. The cemetery is the cemetery is the cemetery is the cemetery until 46.4. So anything that a landowner does about that is a desecration. Other relevant precedents, Davis versus May, Texas 2003. These all go back to times. It confirmed the right of ingress and egress for family members. And so it's a precedent. McCoy versus Barr, Kansas, 2012. County employees are granted an easement to maintain a cemetery if they so wish. In Tennessee law, they have the same ability. In fact, Wayne County has a whole program on it. And sometimes people don't like it because they own private property to do it, but they're able to do it. Rose versus Nicholas, Missouri, 1981. Relatives are granted the right to restrain an owner from interfering with a cemetery's purpose. I like that one. Stoker versus Brown, and this is a Tennessee case, 1979, so it is recent, fairly recent. It depends on how old you are. I was born in 65, so to me it's kind of recent. In a nutshell, cemetery area is the same as it ever was, even though somehow it miraculously shrank. Like what happens sometimes, landowners will like make a cemetery smaller and smaller. Well, guess what? It doesn't matter. The cemetery is the same size as it ever was, and you're not supposed to be doing that. Okay. Okay, here we are. Why can I plow up a cemetery? It's my land! Well, it might not be really yours. Call the Register of Deeds to confirm. A lot of times in a deed, there will be an exclusion. So you'll think you own it, but it's excluded and it doesn't belong to you. Even if it is yours, you still must leave it alone. See TCA 46A. There is a legal process for relocation, 46.4. And if the rules make you angry, blame English common law. Blame the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which establishes the religious part of everything. And blame yourself for purchasing the land before you use the law. So, what should I do if I'm a landowner? Follow the law. If you don't, you're going to lose. It's expensive. It'll take up your limited time on earth. Be nice. Visitors may be annoying, and some are, but try to work something out if they request access. Don't just do what you want and hope no one finds out. If you do, interested parties will call me, and I'll investigate, and my investigation will annoy you. Visitor, be courteous. There are many reasons a landowner is reluctant to have you on his or her property. If a landowner is a curmudgeon, be nice anyway and document everything. So, for more information, you can contact me. That is not my phone number anymore. I have a new phone, and it is not on the cards either. But you can find it on the side, or you can just email me and I'll email it to you, or I can write it down for you today. I don't memorize it. I haven't memorized it because it's a cell phone, and I'm of the challenged age where I'm still trying to memorize cell phone stuff. Anyway, the Tennessee Division of Archaeology is a number to have handy, and that is the correct number for Phil Hodge, and there is his email.
So, my presentation is called Finding John Talley, and really a part of myself. And to understand where I'm going, I need to start at the beginning. Who we talk about? John Talley. John Talley was a private. He was in the 3rd Continental Light Dragoons. He served in the Continental Army. He signed up for 3 years, but the war ended in 1783 and he was mustered out. And what happened to him after that? Well, his family, they started the Western migration. He moved to North Carolina, Georgia. I guess he didn't know where West was. He went south. And then sometime in the 1800s, he moved to Tennessee, came to Williamson County, lived here for 20 years. And then he moved to Perry County, and that's where he lived, and that's where he died, November 28, 1843. Now, I say all this because I knew nothing about him. I'm telling you now stuff that I didn't, 4 years ago, I wouldn't have known him at all. In the family history, he was MIA, missing in action. Nobody said a word. My dad was in the military. My uncles served. Nobody said a word about the Revolutionary War soldier. So truly missing in action. DNA was the first gateway to identify him. My brother did a DNA test, and I have a twin brother. And he came back and said that he had heard that because of the DNA, he was related to a revolutionary soldier named John Talley. News to me. And I just sort of set it aside. I was too busy with other things. Well, when I retired, I got to thinking about that. And the only way to really prove that you are related to a distant person in the Revolutionary War, the gold standard is to use the Sons of the American Revolution. And I joined them with the stated purpose of trying to determine, was I truly related to John? And that's how I met Lisa. And a bunch of other people too, so it's here. And so that process took about 1.5 years to determine that I was truly related to him. Research in the archives, I did local, I went out of state, and I had a local county historian tell me, in Williamson County, Lewis County, Hickman County, and Perry County. And very supportive. And then finally, approval by the property owner with a request. Now, everything that that Matthew mentioned in his about the laws, I did all that. I followed them all, so you can rest easy on that. I'm not going to quote them here, but just so I did follow everything. And the bottom line is, once I determined where they were, and I knew they were in Perry County, and I had a separate, narrow it down to a certain area. Well, when I did that, I came across the property owner, And the county historian, Ms. Tiller, went to him and arranged a meeting in his office. And I had to make a presentation, and with the evidence I had acquired as to that there was a Revolutionary War soldier, my ancestors, buried in his backyard. And he approved it, but he had one request. So I find the septic. True story. He said that I had told him I'm going to use a ground penetrating radar technician to come out to his property. And he paused and he said, I have a request. I thought he was going to ask for money, to be honest with you. But he said, no, you can buy my septic tank, I'll be happy. So, we did that. This is the area in question. X marks the lot, if you will. Here's the Buffalo River, of course, and this is the guy's house. He owned both these lots, so hence the graves are in his backyard, or his side yard, if you will. So we had a ground penetrating radar technician. He came out of Smyrna. He met me there in November 17th, I guess it was, a cold, cold day in Perry County. And he found 4 graves. And this is where they were. Pretty neat, huh? They gave me this little slide after I paid the one. So there's the septic tank right there. There's the leach field right there. See where I'm going with this?
Oh, dear. Yeah.
You know?
Yikes.
There. So I'm standing on that leach field. I'm thinking, wait a minute. Now there's a grave here. After he's been there 20 years, how much of that stuff is leached that way and not that way? Anyway. So, but my goal in doing this was to make it known in the public record. And everything I talked about, and Graham and I talked about, everything said, make it in the public record. How do you do that? Why would I want to be in the public record? Question, is this graveyard in the public record?
Yes, sure.
Do you know where it is?
Yeah.
Some of you do already. That's a little test to see you're paying attention. There's a Revolutionary War soldier right over there. He's right there. There's a flag. But this is in the public record. Okay. So, is this in the public record?
No. No,
I haven't seen that one.
that's a pit.
This is a horse that died of college. My wife is right there. She can vouch for that. But so I just want to test you on that. So could it be in the public record? Could I change my deed to reflect the presence of that animal?
No.
I don't know about the deed, but if you call my office, I know that TDEC is excited when I put pet cemeteries on there. So
This is a big horse, so I'm not through that. But anyway, I know that in there, just because it has a headstone or a footstone doesn't necessarily mean it's in the public record. But my intent all along was to put these graves in the public record because they weren't in the public record before, and if I didn't do that, they disappeared. So, what to do? What to do? I had options. I had 3 options. These came out of Graham's office. I could survey and add to the owner's deed. Remember, you talked about that. I wasn't the owner of the property. And technically, the owner surveys and adds to the deed. I paid $800 for the privilege of having that record because he didn't want to do it.
Right.
And when those flags were pulled up out of there, and they disappeared. So that was one option. Survey and add to the owner's deed. He did not want to do that. And you'll notice it talks about the egress, right there is the entryway, the street, and that's how I get there. Survey did all that stuff. So that was one option. Option 2, replace the missing headstones. This is the site right here. This is how I saw it. There I went and looked at it. The graves, there's 4 of them. There's a grave right here, and then there's 2 there, and 1 right there. The septic tank's over here. The Buffalo River is right there. There's a bluff that drops 30 feet down. And then it is a chicken coop. You can't see it, but there's a chicken coop right over here in the shadows there. Real chickens. So, that was option 2. And then the third option was to relocate it. And to do that, you had to have a place to relocate it to. The law is quite specific on that. So I had chosen this site for doing that if I were to do that. So what to do? What to do? I had options. I relocated it. was leading up to make you decide what I should do, but in the interest of time, I'll tell you the answer. I filed a petition, just like Graham was saying, and I did this on May 2023 in the Chancery Court. Notice when it was heard. Doesn't that seem strange? You notice that? And I used to be a project manager many moons ago, and I know how to kick butt and get things moving. If I hadn't kicked butt and got moving, this would not have happened. And he can vouch for me on that. They were just content to kick the can down the proverbial road. And if this hadn't been heard by September, guess what happens to my petition? It drops off, they toss it out. Said, start again. So I wasn't about to do that. So we pushed them and they did that. So anyway, I filed a petition to relocate. And the judge approved it. Hey, he didn't like me too much, but he approved it. Anyway, we won't go into that. But there were stipulations. There's no free lunch in this world. And these were the agreed upon conditions for removal. I think I got the code right there. Anyway, there was a monetary fee. Nothing's free. I had to pay $5,000 to that owner with the septic tank to move them. They wanted $10,000. His attorney wanted $10,000. The judge, no, $5,000. That was the attorney's fee. The indemnity term was 10 years. You and I discussed this. I always thought it was going to be less, so why did you bother? Well, there is a thing called statute of limitations in the Tennessee Code, and by golly, it says 10 years. And the judge had nothing to do with that. That's the way it was. The amount was $1 million, which I thought was a lot, but in hindsight, it really wasn't. This is typical insurance amounts. And notice this, DNA testing. Why would they not want it? They were adamant about that. If I agreed to no DNA testing, well, why would somebody want that out of there? Any idea? They were afraid that somebody would come out of the woodwork who hadn't been there in 20 years and suddenly say, hey, you just moved my mama. You just moved my historic mama, you know, in which case they would sue the landowner. So to prevent that, they said no DNA testing. So I agreed to do that, just to move it along. Move it along. There was agreed upon project dates for the court. Notice the red here. I was a project manager, like I said, many years ago, so I know how to move a project. The key date was on November 15th. His attorney, wanted my project team done and out of there by November 15th, okay? So to do that, I had to allow a 30-day window right here to allow for ground settling and just to fill in, you know how you move something and you get that cavity, and you gotta fill it in. So they wanted that done. But I had also set October 19 for a reinterment ceremony at the Charles Talley Memorial Cemetery. Very historic date. That was when General Cornwallis surrendered to American forces at Yorktown. And my ancestry was at Yorktown. So I thought, hey, that'd be kind of cool. And so the last date, and back over here to this date, I had to give the landowner a 30-day notice before I decided my project would start. To make that happen, that would be on August 30th. I had to give him $5,000 and a letter of intent to move them. And so I drove over to Berry County. I mean, I was like at the last minute. I drove over there, gave him the money, gave him the letter, and that started the clock. Now, this is important because if I miss that date, there is a domino effect, and all these dates start going back. And what are the odds of my making this date happen? Not too good. What's going to happen? The lawyers had my petition or had the court order in hand for 2.5 months. And on August 30th, they still didn't have a final copy of it. And so I had done some research and I found out that you can also do a verbal court order. And so since we all agreed on the conditions, I mean, we were all there, the judge said this and we all agreed to it, I asked the two attorneys, can we do a verbal order on this? My son is an attorney, he said, Dad, don't do this. But I was so badly determined to make it happen, I said, I'm going to do it. So they went ahead and based on those two attorneys saying, yes, go for it, I went ahead and did all this stuff by August 30th. So, very important on this part here. Okay, there were challenges. I just told you about the court order. Now, I think in your presentation you talked about the Tennessee Department of Health.
Yeah.
You got to have that. And I knew that because I read the rules just like everybody else. I just forgot them. And I had a Tennessee a mortuary office funeral home call me who was working with me, and she said, "Hey, you need to have this permit." Well, how do I get the permit? You got to have a court order. So I called my attorney. Where's the court order? It was on Monday. He said, "I'll have it to you by Friday." Okay. Come Friday, all I got was a request to change some verbiage in the court order. And I'm thinking, oh my. And so I asked my funeral home director, can you go to the State Department of Health and ask them, hey, can I give you an old permit from a previous, the previous step? She said, we can try, but no, they wanted one signed by the judge. And so, and then there was the weather. Does everybody remember Hurricane Helene? Yep. How can you forget? Right? So it come dashing through Middle Tennessee, and lo and behold, I had a call with my archaeologist. He and I, very nice guy, former state archaeologist for Alaska. He had come with me for the last 2.5 years. So he and I had a weekly call, and he says, "Oh, David, by the way, because there was so much damage in North Carolina, I am on a special team for the federal government, and I may be called to go to North Carolina to help with recovery efforts." He said, "I'd love to start with you because I am contractually obligated, but the government takes a bigger step. I may have to go and leave you there with 2 holes uncovered and 2 holes not uncovered." So I had, that was crazy, trying to figure out what was going to happen on that. But I had options. I could do ask the judge to review the conditions out there that I didn't like, the DNA, for example. I'd want that put back in there. I could reschedule, or I could dismiss. How many people think I had the judge review? How many people think I did a reschedule? Reschedule is important. It wasn't rescheduling for next week or next month. Oh, no. We're talking rescheduling for a year. So my archaeologist was quite blunt. He said, "We only dig up people in October." Why is that? Look outside today. What was it like? You want to go out and dig up somebody, don't you? And all month it's been nice. I couldn't wait to get outside and dig up somebody. But anyway, my archaeologist was saying, go. You do it in October. Do it. So my lawyer said, okay, October's fine. Do it in October 2025. And that's not good. Do it in October 2026. I can assure you, I do not have mud on my pants, so we did not do it in 2025. I told him, I'm going to Scotland in 2025. My wife and I just got back. And in 2026, I plan to be in Tanzania, Africa, not in a graveyard in Perry County. So, rescheduling, not so much. What about the last one? Dismiss. We put a lot of money into this, folks. Don't ask me. I put a lot of money into it in time, okay? So what would I do? What would you do? Dismiss? Judge? Wait. Judge not. Anybody on the last one? Dismiss?
No, I haven't dismissed.
Uh-oh. Okay, these are the sites I had. This is the, obviously you've seen that, you now know that there's 4 bodies out there. Trust me, they're there. And then this is the Hickman site. Now, you notice the headstones and the flagstones there, right? In order to transfer, and I had to do all this ahead of time. This was assuming that this was going to happen, of course. It wanted to happen. So this graveyard is owned by a cousin of mine, and her son is a historic history nut. He said, hey, if you're going to put these graves here, you need to put them in the position they are in Perry County.
Exactly.
I thought, how many each? I need 940 square feet, please. And they carved out, if I did by yours, the 10-foot easement fee of like 1,300 square feet. I don't need that. So they gave me 940 square feet, and I went ahead and I placed them. There's Jane, the wife, there's the John right there, and then these are two unknowns. I think I know who this one is, but this one, I think it's a slave. But I don't know. But anyway, so those are my options. Where do you think I went? How many people think I went here? How many people, do y'all think I went here? She's nodding over there. I got 5 minutes, folks, come on. All right, I want you to think what? This side?
Yes. Yes. But
No, you dug the holes first.
no, you moved it.
Do you see one of my knees? You know, they said, the lawyer said they was gonna charge me money so I could move the corpses. And I used the corpses, and there wasn't no corpses. No. So, the final site, drum roll please. Is there. Do you notice anything different about this slide than the other slides?
They posted signs.
What's that?
They posted signs.
They posted signs. Oh, wow. I was surprised they didn't put in Braille just to make sure I understood what they're talking about. So, yeah, they posted signs. They weren't there before. A cousin of mine drove by and saw them the day that he put them up. And you notice how it says posted here? Posted, and no trespassing. Now, if you were paying attention to Mr. Barry said, did that apply to me?
No.
No, hell no. I'm going where I want to go. Right? But do I do that? Do I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do. You said no.
No.
No. Why would I not do that?
Because we're respectful of each other. We're neighbors.
We're neighbors.
And we'll
If I just
shoot.
paid $5,000 to that, be respectful. Yeah. But you're right. Why would I? When I go visit him, what do I do?
Call first.
I'm not going to call him. No, he disconnected his email from me, so I can't communicate. Seriously. So what do I do?
Drive by.
No, drive by. Drive by what? No, no, what I do. What's that? No, he is out of the picture. So I haven't seen him in a year, have I? That's right, he's out of the picture. So what do? I use the
Sheriff's Department.
no.
I'm so sorry.
What?
Lawyer.
No.
You wrote a letter.
A letter. Yeah, good minutes ago. I send a letter. I do that for a couple reasons. Protect my butt, for one reason. But I don't have to do it. I do it because it's a chain. I keep asking for permission. And every time I do that letter, I have a form letter, I always end it by saying, I'm so grateful that you gave me permission to find my family, my descendants, blah, 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 blah. I say that to him. And then I tell him, I'm going to be at your place on this date between these at time. Usually between 1, say, and 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And now what am I going to do there for 2 hours? All right, you go figure. But I do go there, and I'll walk out there, and I'll just check to make sure there's no tire marks like this.
Right.
You know, has anybody done anything out there? And I just look around, all right, and then I leave, okay? So that's the current site. You know, as I said, that's the current site. The judge approved without prejudice. This is important. Anybody know what that means?
You can refile.
I can refile. If I got enough money, I'm making donations tonight before you leave. So if I had some money and some time, I could refile. So that was kind of nice. And then my attorney was sure that it would come back with prejudice because the way I acted in the court. But anyway, so it came back without prejudice. But what did we do? What about those grave sites, those gravestones in the other cemetery? You know, I said October 19th was a special day. Hey, it was a special day, grave, bodies, remains, or no remains. It was going to happen. I had mailed out all these invitations to these people to come from far and wide to have this ceremony. And you think I'm going to let that one little dismissal stop having the ceremony? Heck no, we're going to do it. So we did it. And a cenotaph, if you can see that. What's a cenotaph? Anybody know? What's that?
Well, it's a memorial that's in a different place from the real burial. So you have two memorials. You have a real burial with a marker, and then this is a secondary one that shows a relationship, or anyway, it's not the real grave, but it's just a memorial.
Yes. Very good. What page number did you get that from? Oh, look, that's the perfect example. That is it in a nutshell.
That's in
So we did this on October 19th. We had a color guard from or honor guard from Fort Campbell come down. And great guys. This box is the box that the remains would have been in, had I moved them, dug them up, whatever, okay? So we had tacks, we had the flag folded, the flag was given to my cousin's mother, and we had an firing detail on the side. You can't see it over here on the left over here. 21 gun salute. And there was a dry eye in the bunch, including myself. I'm very sentimental. But anyway, this fellow, just as an aside, he told me, he said, "Colonel, I've been doing this for so many years, but this is the first time I've ever done it for no body." No body. I wanted to tell him, well, man, there's somebody in here, you know. He was really cool about it. So we did that dedication. So, and that's me. That's the headstone. Notice right here, I don't lie. Born in Amelia County, Virginia. Died Perry County, Tennessee. You know, just in case I'm not around to explain it to somebody. That's what happened. And one last thing. Okay, what about the public record? Did I get it on the public record? Got 2 minutes left. Did I do it? All right. These are the sources for the public record. You notice we talk about the Chancery Court. If you want to go and get it to Perry County, ask for, I think, case number is 5042, whatever it is. And they'll give you all the documents that came with that court case. This is the Tennessee Historic Commission website, and yes, it's on there because I gave him all the materials to put on there and double checked it was on there. And interestingly enough, everybody, you all familiar with Find a Grave and BillionGraves.com? Which is the better site? Ooh, I thought so too at one time. One time I thought so too. But Billion Graves is the better site. And here's the reason why. They make a big deal about it, that they are a public record. They come out and tell you, this, we are a part of the public record on these graves. And you notice right here, this is the survey, and I just imposed it on the land site, and then you see the markers. These are accidents. I have to go back and clean them up. But if this was done right, those markers would be within this right here, so you know. And then over here, it tells you where they are, where the site is located. And lo and behold, right here, it tells you the street address, and then I actually have a description of what happened here. And then these are the folks that are buried there. In fact, Jane in there twice, I got to take it out. But anyway, these are and then these are the cemeteries nearby, which makes this a legitimate source. And it truly is a strong state. I think that's it. My God.